The night was cold and heavy, and the storm outside was loud. Rain slapped against the small house, and the wind pushed against the walls as if it wanted to break inside. The man sat alone in the dim light, staring at the empty table. His life on this alien world was quiet, almost too quiet. For weeks he had not spoken to anyone, not even a message from Earth had reached him. He thought maybe this was how his life would always be. A human forgotten on a world that was not his own. The storm grew stronger and the sound of thunder rolled like a warning. He picked up a small cup of warm water, sipping slowly. He thought he would go to sleep early, but then it happened. A knock. It was not soft. It was not gentle. It was heavy, urgent, desperate. He froze, the cup shaking in his hand. Who would knock at his door in this storm, in this lonely part of the colony? The knock came again, louder, faster. His chest tightened. He stood up slowly, his eyes locked on the door. The lights flickered as the wind screamed outside. He reached for the small tool he kept on the table. Not a gun, not a blade, just a piece of metal strong enough to use if he had to. For a moment he thought about ignoring it, pretending he had not heard, but the sound came again, not just knocking, now a voice, a soft voice, yet full of pain. Please. Open the door. The words cut through the storm. They were not human words, but his translator implant shaped them into English. His throat went dry. An alien here at his door, begging. He stepped closer, each footstep slow. His mind raced, with questions. Why was someone out there in the storm? Why did they come to him? Was it a trap or was it real? His hand touched the door. The wood was trembling from the wind. He took a breath, deep and heavy, and pulled it open. Lightning flashed, showing the figure outside. Tall, thin, her skin was pale with strange marks glowing faintly in the rain. Her eyes were large, bright like two burning lamps. Her clothes were torn, her body trembling from the cold. And behind her, hiding in the shadows, he thought he saw movement, smaller shapes, little forms clinging to her legs. But before he could look closer, her voice came again, breaking, shaking. I will warm your bed, human. My children need a father. The words struck him like a blade. He could not move, could not breathe. Was this real? Was this some kind of trick? The alien woman's face was wet with rain and tears. Her eyes locked on his with desperation. Not anger, not hatred, but something raw, something heavy. For a moment the man thought of closing the door, pushing her away. But then he saw the small faces behind her, eyes wide with fear, little hands clutching her torn clothes. The storm screamed louder, as if the world itself wanted him to decide. He stood frozen, torn between fear and pity. His lonely house now felt too small, too weak to hold the weight of this moment. The widow's voice broke again, softer this time. Please, I have nowhere else to go. And the human man, alone for so long, realized his night of silence had ended. His story was about to change. The man kept standing by the open door, the storm roaring behind the alien widow, her voice still. Echoed in his mind strange words shaped into English by his translator. I will warm your bed, human. My children need a father. The sentence was so heavy, so strange that his heart beat faster. He had no answer, not yet. She stepped forward, weak and unsteady. Her long fingers held the door frame as if she might fall. The rain dripped from her skin, glowing faintly under the lightning. Her children, 3 small figures, pressed closer to her, hiding their faces. Only their eyes peeked out, wide and shining. Please, she said again. My mate is gone, my home is gone, I have nothing left, only them. She looked down at the children, her voice cracked like glass. The man did not move. His mind was full of doubt, he thought. Of all the warnings the colony council gave, do not get too close to them, their ways are not our ways. But now, face to face with this widow, those words felt far away. They felt like orders made by people who never stood at a door with life begging to be let in. The storm pushed harder, shaking the house. He opened the door wider, letting her step inside. She staggered forward, pulling her children with her. The warmth of the small house wrapped around them, and for the first time he saw them clearly. The children were not frightening. They were small, thin, with soft skin patterned like their mother's, glowing lines, that moved faintly like rivers of light. Their eyes were too big for their faces, but when they looked at him there was no hate, only fear. The man placed the metal tool back on the table. His voice was rough. He had almost forgotten how it felt to speak to someone. "Sit," he said, pointing to a chair. She nodded, pulling the children close. They huddled together, dripping water onto the floor. The man gave her a cloth, simple and old. She took it in shaking hands, drying the children first, then herself. For a long moment there was silence, only the storm outside and the sound of small breaths inside. Then she spoke, her voice low. "The war has ended, but for us, it never ends. My mate fought. He died far from here. I buried what was left, and now they hunt the families left behind. Widows, orphans, anyone weak. They say we should not exist. They want to erase us." Her words were heavy. Her eyes met his, glowing with sorrow. "I came here because humans are different. You fight, you protect, you stay with your young even when everything else is lost. My children need that. They need a father." The man swallowed hard. He was only one person, far from Earth, forgotten. By his own people he was no hero, no warrior, yet her words cut deep because they were not only about her children, they were about him too. Alone, empty, forgotten. He had no family here, no reason to wake up each morning except to count the hours until sleep returned. He looked at the children again. One of them, the smallest, was staring back at him. Her little voice whispered, "Are you dangerous, human?" He almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. He answered quietly, "Only if I have to be." The child blinked, then leaned closer to her mother. The widow touched her child's head gently. Her hand shook, not from cold, but from fear. The man felt the weight of choice pressing down. If he told them to leave, the storm might kill them. Or worse, those who hunted widows might find them. If he let them stay, his life would change forever. He walked to the small fire stove, placing more fuel inside. The flames grew, sending warmth across the room. He said slowly, "You can stay tonight, but tomorrow, I will decide." The widow lowered her head, her voice trembling. "Thank you, human. You will not regret this, I swear." But the man was not so sure. He looked at the storm outside the window, lightning flashing across the alien sky, and for the first time in many months he felt the sense that something much larger than him was moving, a storm not just of wind and rain, but of fate. The children curled near the fire, their small glowing marks lighting the shadows like stars. The widow sat quietly, watching him with eyes full of unspoken hope, and the man, alone no longer, sat in silence, wondering what kind of life had just stepped through his door. The house was quiet except for the storm outside. The man sat across the small room, his eyes watching the strange family that had entered his life without warning. The widow sat near the fire, her body bent as if the weight of the universe rested on her shoulders. Her children were huddled close, 3 little shadows with glowing lines on their skin. For a long time they said nothing. The man only listened to the sound of crackling fire and the beating of his own heart. He told himself he should not care. He told himself that tomorrow he would send them away, but each time he looked at the children, something inside him shifted. The smallest child peeked at him from behind her mother's arm. Her eyes were wide, too large for her face, glowing faintly in the dim light. When he noticed her gaze, she quickly hid again. The middle child, a boy, was braver. He whispered something in his own language to his sister. His words were soft, almost musical. The translator implant caught only a few fragments. Human, dangerous, maybe safe. The man sighed. His life had been quiet but not peaceful. He had no friends, no family. He had left Earth hoping for purpose, but he had found only silence. And now, in one night, his empty home was filled with eyes, watching him, studying him, judging if he was a monster or a savior. The widow finally spoke, her voice rough from cold and grief. "They have not eaten today," she said. Her eyes did not rise to meet his as if asking for food was shameful. The man stood walking to the small storage box by the wall. Inside were rations, simple, tasteless bars made for survival, not comfort. He pulled out 3 and placed them on the table. The children looked at them with hesitation. Their glowing eyes flicked between the food and the human. The boy asked, "Poison?" His voice trembled. The man shook his head slowly, breaking one of the bars in half and taking a bite. The taste was dry, bitter, but he chewed calmly. "See? Not poison," he said. The children moved closer, step by step. Their bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. They reached for the food with thin hands, clutching it as if it might vanish. They ate quickly, almost too quickly, crumbs falling to the ground. The man watched them, his chest heavy. He remembered his own childhood back on Earth. He remembered dinners at a long table, laughter, warmth, a life that had felt endless. Now all of that was gone, and in its place sat 3 hungry alien children. After they ate, the smallest girl crept closer to him. Her voice was small, like a whisper carried by the wind. "Will you leave us too, human?" The question hit him harder than any blade. He did not answer right away. His throat felt tight. He looked at her small hands glowing faintly with light. She reminded him of a child he once knew, a neighbor's daughter back on Earth, always asking questions, always seeking comfort. Finally, he said, "I don't know." His voice was low, uncertain. The little girl blinked, her lips pressing into a thin line. She turned and crawled back to her mother, curling up against her. The widow stroked her child's hair gently, though her eyes never left the human. The storm outside raged louder. The wind howled like voices of the dead. Lightning flashed, casting shadows across the walls. In those shadows, the children looked less like aliens and more like ghosts, haunting him, reminding him of what he had lost and what he might find again. The boy spoke again, his voice firmer this time. "They will come, the hunters. They will smell us. They will find us." The man frowned. "Hunters," he repeated. The widow nodded slowly, her face dark with sorrow. "They killed my mate. They will kill me. They will kill the children. They will not stop. They will not forgive me for running." The man felt anger rise in his chest. It was not his war, not his fight, yet the thought of these children hunted like animals filled him with heat. He looked at the boy, then the widow, and finally the storm outside. Somewhere beyond those winds, something dangerous was searching for them. The fire flickered low, casting the room into half-darkness. The children curled together on the floor, their glowing marks lighting their small circle of safety. The widow leaned against the wall, her eyes finally closing as exhaustion dragged her down. The man stayed awake, sitting in silence. He listened to the storm, to the breathing of the children, to the cracking of the wood in the fire. Every sound felt sharp, important, as if the world was holding its breath. For the first time in years, he was not alone, but instead of peace, it brought fear. Not fear of them, but of what would come for them. Fear that by opening his door, he had opened his life to something he could not close again. As the night deepened, the shadows in the corners seemed to move. The man's hand rested near the metal tool on the table. His eyes stayed open, watching, waiting, wondering if the hunters were already near. The children slept in the glow of their own light, innocent, fragile, and yet carrying the weight of war on their small shoulders, and the man, caught between pity and dread, whispered to himself, "What have I done?" The storm outside did not sleep. It clawed at the house with howling winds and heavy rain. The man sat near the dying fire, his hand close to the metal tool on the table. His eyes did not close. He could not let them close. The alien widow and her children slept in the corner, curled together like a single shadow. Their faint glowing lines painted soft patterns on the walls. For a moment they looked peaceful, almost like any family. But the man knew peace was only an illusion. Every gust of wind felt like a knock, every flash of lightning like a warning. He had lived long enough on this world to know when the night was hiding something, and tonight, the night felt alive. A sound broke through the storm, different from the wind. It was distant, heavy. A thud followed by another. The man froze, leaning forward. His ears caught it again. Footsteps, slow, steady, approaching through the rain. He rose quietly, stepping toward the window. His eyes peered into the black storm. At first he saw nothing, only sheets of rain and moving branches. But then, in the distance he saw a shape, tall and sharp against the flashes of lightning. And behind it more shapes. His chest tightened. He turned back to the sleeping widow. She had told him of hunters, the ones who killed her mate. His mind whispered the truth he did not want to accept. They had found her. The footsteps drew closer, heavy against the mud. He could hear voices now, low, guttural, cruel. They laughed. Between words, the kind of laugh that belonged to killers. The man shook the widow gently. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with sudden fear. She listened, and in that instant she knew. Her voice was sharp but quiet. They are here. The children stirred, one of them whimpering. She hushed them, pulling them closer. The man felt the weight of decision crash over him again. He could throw them out, lock the door, pretend they never came, but deep down he knew, even if he closed the door, the hunters would still come, and they would kill them all. The laughter outside grew louder, closer. A shadow moved across the window. The man gripped the metal tool, but it felt weak in his hand. He remembered the old weapon hidden under the floorboard, a relic from Earth. He had promised himself he would never use it again. Yet now, he had no choice. He crouched down, pulling up the wooden board. His hands shook as he lifted the weapon, an old rifle. Simple, heavy, scratched by years of use. He had not held it since leaving Earth, but it felt alive in his hands. The widow's voice was trembling. You cannot fight them alone. The man looked at her, his eyes cold. Then we fight together. The children clung to her legs, their glowing marks flickering like fading stars. The widow's jaw tightened. She touched her children's heads, whispering words of comfort in her own tongue. Then she rose, tall and fierce. The sorrow in her eyes burned into something sharper. Fury. The hunters reached the door. A heavy fist struck the wood, shaking the house. A voice growled, "We? No, you are inside, widow. Come out, and we may leave the human alive." The man's stomach twisted. They already knew he was here. His life was now tied to hers whether he wanted it or not. The widow hissed back, "You killed my mate. You will not touch my children." The hunters laughed, a cruel chorus. Another blow struck the door, harder, splinters falling to the floor. The man raised the rifle, pointing it at the door. His finger brushed the trigger. His breath slowed. He was not a soldier anymore, but in this moment he remembered what it meant to fight. The door cracked under the next strike. The storm howled through the broken wood. Lightning flashed, showing a shadowed face with sharp teeth and eyes burning with hate. The hunters roared. Ready to tear through, the children cried out, their voices sharp with terror. The widow pulled them back, her body between them and the danger. The man stood in front, his rifle aimed, his heart steady for the first time in years. The storm outside became part of the battle. The wind screamed, the rain lashed, and the hunters struck again. The house shook, wood splintering under their power. The man knew the fight was coming. He knew blood would spill tonight. But as he stood there, ready to protect strangers who had stepped into his life, he realized something. He was no longer afraid of being alone, because he was not alone anymore. The hunters outside roared once more, preparing to break through. And inside, the man tightened his grip. The widow raised her voice in defiance, and the children held each other in silence, waiting. The dark was no longer just outside the house. It was at the door, scratching, biting, ready to enter. And the man whispered under his breath, "If you come for them, you will have to go through me." The door broke apart with a deafening crack. The hunters forced their way in, shadows flooding the small house. The storm roared. Behind them, lightning flashing across their twisted faces. They were tall, armored with rough plates of bone, their teeth sharp, their eyes glowing with cruel hunger. The children screamed, clutching at their mother. The widow pushed them behind her. her glowing marks burning brighter in fear and fury. She let out a low growl, her body tense like a wild animal ready to strike. The man raised his rifle. His hands did not shake. His breath was steady. The first hunter stepped forward, laughing. "Human thinks he can fight," the creature mocked. Its voice was thick and sharp, but the translator made it clear. The man pulled the trigger. The sound thundered through the room. The shot struck the hunter's chest, blood sprayed, dark and steaming against the cold air. The creature roared, stumbling back. The others snarled, rushing forward. The widow leapt, her movements quick and furious, her hands struck like claws, glowing marks on her skin flashing with every hit. She moved with the rage of loss, the rage of a mate taken and children hunted. The man fired again, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. A second hunter fell, clutching its throat. The others slowed, surprised that a human's weapon still carried death. But they were many and the house was small. One swung a jagged blade at the man. He ducked, the blade cutting through the wall behind him, splinters flying. He slammed the rifle's butt into the attacker's face, breaking bone. The widow lunged, finishing the creature with a scream that shook the walls. The children huddled together, their glowing lines pulsing like frightened stars. They watched with wide eyes, too young to understand but old enough to feel terror. Another hunter pushed through the broken door, larger than the rest, its eyes locked on the widow. "Coward!" it hissed. "You beg humans for protection. You shame your kind." The widow bared her teeth. "Better shame than death," she snapped. Her claws tore across the hunter's arm. But it was strong. It struck her hard, sending her crashing into the table. Wood shattered, fire sparks scattered. Across the floor the man shouted, rage boiling inside him. He fired point blank into the creature's chest. The blast ripped it open, but still it staggered forward. The man had to shove it back with his shoulder. The rifle almost slipped from his hands. The widow rose, blood dripping from her mouth. She did not fall. She attacked again, her body burning with fury. Together, human and alien struck as one. The storm outside screamed louder. Wind tore at the broken house, rain poured inside. The battle became chaos. Gunshots, roars, screams, the crack of wood, the hiss of fire. The man felt his body ache with every move. His lungs burned, his arms shook, but he did not stop. He could not stop because behind him were the children, watching, depending, praying. One hunter tried to reach them, slipping past the fight, its claws stretched toward the smallest child. The girl cried out, but the man spun faster than thought. The rifle roared again, and the creature fell at her feet, dead. The little girl's eyes met his, wide and wet with tears. She whispered one word, "Protector." The word gave him strength. He turned back, facing the last of the hunters. Blood covered the floor. Bodies lay twisted, but still a few remained. Their laughter was gone, replaced with snarls of rage. The widow and the man stood side by side, her glowing marks flaring like fire, his rifle smoking in his hands. For a brief moment, they looked not like strangers but like warriors of one tribe. The hunters charged again. The man fired. The widow struck. The storm outside seemed to fight with them, thunder shaking the sky, lightning splitting the dark. The air smelled of blood, rain and fire. One by one, the hunters fell. Their bodies littered the floor. The last one tried to run, but the widow caught it. Her claws tore its throat. Her voice screamed with fury and pain. She did not stop until the creature lay still. Silence followed. Only the storm remained. The fire was low, the floor soaked with blood and rain. The man's chest rose and fell in heavy breaths. His rifle hung, at his side empty, his arms weak, but he was alive. They were alive. The widow stood, her body trembling. Her eyes glowed in the dim firelight. She turned to him, her voice was heavy, almost breaking. "You fought for us, human. You protected my children." The children rushed to him, their small hands glowing as they clung to his arms, their voices soft and full of awe. "Protector, protector," they whispered again and again. The man looked down at them. His heart felt heavier than any rifle. He had not chosen this, but the choice had chosen him. Outside, the storm began to fade. The hunters were gone, but the night had changed everything. The human was no longer just a stranger on this world. He had spilled blood for them. He had become something more, and in the silence after the storm, the man realized he was not fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for them. The storm had passed, but the house was broken. The door hung in pieces. The floor was wet with rain and dark with blood. The smell of smoke and iron filled the air. The man leaned against the wall, his rifle heavy in his hands. His body ached, with bruises. His arms shook from the fight. Yet his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the room, waiting for another shadow that never came. The hunters were gone. Their bodies lay scattered, silent and cold. Lightning no longer flashed outside. Only the faint sound of distant thunder remained. But inside the small home, another sound filled the air. The soft cries of children. The widow was on her knees, pulling her young close. Her hands moved across their glowing skin, checking every mark, every line. Her voice was low, singing words in her own tongue, a song cracked by pain but still carrying comfort. The children pressed against her, safe but shaken. The man watched, his chest heavy. He had seen death before, he had lost people before, but never like this, never while 3 little lives looked at him with eyes that asked a question he was not ready to answer. The smallest girl stepped away from her mother and walked to him. Her bare feet touched the blood on the floor, glowing footprints marking her path. She tugged at his arm, her tiny voice trembling. "Protector, are you hurt?" The man looked down. His clothes were torn, his hands cut. Blood dried on his face, but he shook his head. "I'll live," he said softly. The girl stared at him, then wrapped her arms around his leg. Her small body shook. She did not let go. Her glow touched him, warm and fragile. The widow rose, her eyes locked on him. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "You fought for us. You did not run. You are human. But you are more than human now. You are family." The words struck him harder than the battle had. He wanted to argue, to say he was no father, no protector, just a man stranded far from earth. But the way she looked at him, the way her children clung to him, burned away his excuses. The boy approached next. His chin lifted, trying to look braver than he was. His voice cracked as he said, "Will you leave us human?" The question hung in the air like a blade. The man's throat tightened. He had planned to be alone until his last day. He had never wanted chains, never wanted a family on this alien world. But now, with their glowing eyes staring at him, he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt needed. "I don't know," he whispered. The words were true, but even as he said them, he felt the lie inside, because deep in his chest he already knew he could not walk away. The widow stepped closer. She stood taller now, her sorrow changed into strength. "My children need a father," she said again, but this time not as a plea. This time it was a truth, a declaration. The man's hands clenched around the rifle. He remembered his own father, strong and tired, working long days and still finding time to sit at the table with him. He remembered laughter, stories, warmth. He remembered the day he left Earth, telling himself he would not need any of that again. Now, standing here, he realized he had been wrong. The children moved closer, circling him like small stars. Their glow touched his skin. Their small voices called him protector again and again. His chest ached with a strange weight, heavy but not painful. It was the weight of belonging. He looked at the widow. Her eyes were tired but steady, her marks glowing in the faint firelight. She did not beg anymore. She did not need to, because the truth was already between them. The man finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "If I stay, if I stand with you, they will come again, you know that." The widow nodded slowly. "Yes, they will come. They will never forgive me for surviving. They will never forgive you for helping me. But together, maybe we can stand. Alone, we will fall. But together, we can fight." Her words settled inside him like stone, strong and unshakable. He looked at the broken door, the dead hunters, the storm fading beyond. He thought of the silence he once lived in, the empty nights, the lonely mornings. He thought of how easily he could return to that life. But then he looked at the children, their glowing faces full of hope, and he knew he never could. The boy touched his arm, his small hand glowing faintly. "Will you protect us?" The man knelt down, his knees pressed against the wet floor. He looked at each of them, their wide eyes waiting. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I will protect you." The children smiled for the first time that night. Their small voices rose together, whispering the word, again, "Protector, protector, protector." The widow placed her hand on his shoulder. Her touch was firm, her voice soft. "Then you are the father they need." The man's eyes burned, not from smoke, not from blood, but from something deeper, something he had locked away for years, and for the first time since leaving Earth he let it rise. Outside, the storm was gone, the air was clear. The first faint light of dawn began to rise over the horizon, and in that small, broken house, the man, the widow, and her children sat together, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as something new, something stronger. The fight was not over. He knew enemies would return. He knew war would find them again. But now, he was not standing alone. He was standing as protector, as father, as human. The night had ended and the storm was gone. The first light of dawn stretched across the alien sky, pale and soft. The world outside was wet and broken. Trees bent low, the ground flooded with water and scattered branches. Yet inside the small house something had changed, something far greater than the storm. The man sat near the open doorway, his rifle across his lap. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, but his thoughts were heavy within him. Behind him, the widow moved slowly, cleaning the floor, gathering what little remained of their supplies. The children sat together near the fire, their glowing lines flickering gently in the dim light. They were whispering to each other, laughing softly, even after the terror of the night. The man listened to their laughter. It was strange, sharp in his chest. He had not heard that sound in years, not since Earth, not since a time when his own home was full of voices. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound settle inside him like a forgotten warmth returning. The widow paused her work and looked at him. Her eyes held no demand, no plea, only quiet strength. She spoke softly. "You fought with us. You stood with us. You gave us more than survival. You gave us a chance to hope again." The man said nothing at first. He only nodded. His voice came after a long silence, rough and low. "I did what I had to do." The widow stepped closer, her glowing marks faint in the morning light. She placed her hand lightly on his shoulder. Her touch was steady, not desperate, not afraid. "No human has ever done this before. Others turn away. Others fear us. But you stayed." The children looked up from the fire, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The smallest girl whispered, "Protector." The word was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with love. The man felt the weight in his chest grow heavier, but it was no longer the weight of loneliness. It was the weight of belonging, of being needed, of carrying lives that were not his but had become his. Outside, the dead hunters lay where they had fallen. The rain had washed some of the blood away, but the memory of the fight lingered in every shadow. The man knew this was not the end. The widow was right. The hunters would come again, and next time they would bring more. He rose to his feet, his rifle still in hand. He stepped outside, the morning air cool against his face. He looked at the horizon, at the rising sun. He whispered to himself, "They will come, but so will I." The widow followed him to the doorway. Her children stood behind her, watching with wide eyes. She spoke in a calm, steady voice. "This house cannot stand forever. Not against them. We must be ready. We must be more than prey." The man nodded. His voice was firm now. "Then we prepare, we fight for them, for their future." The boy stepped forward, braver now than the night before, his voice small but strong. "Will you teach me, human? Will you teach me to fight?" The man looked. At him the boy's glowing lines pulsed with hope, his jaw clenched. "Yes, I will teach you." The widow's eyes softened but also carried worry. She knew what it meant for her children to grow into warriors instead of just children. Yet she also knew the truth. Without strength, there would be no future. The morning grew brighter. The wet ground sparkled under the rising sun. The world looked new, clean, yet dangerous. The man felt it deep inside. This was only the beginning. He turned back to the family, their glowing faces lit with hope. He spoke firmly. "I am not just your protector. I am with you. I will not leave you." The children ran to him, hugging his legs, their voices rising together. "Protector. Father. Protector." The words filled the house, filling every corner with something stronger than fear. The widow stood quietly, her eyes bright with tears she did not hide. She whispered, "You are human, but now, you are ours." The man closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words sink deep. He had once thought he would die alone on this strange world, forgotten and empty, but now he stood with a family, bound not by blood, but by choice, by survival, by love born in the darkest night. He lifted his rifle, resting it on his shoulder, his voice calm but unyielding. "Let them come again. Let them bring their hate. I will be ready." The widow stepped beside him, her glowing marks bright in the dawn light, her children behind her, their small voices still whispering protector. Together they stood in the broken doorway, the storm gone, the new day rising. And in that moment, the man knew this was not an ending. It was the beginning of something greater, because the world would soon learn what he already knew. Humans do not surrender. Humans do not abandon family. And now, this family was his.